How many times can communities flood from severe weather before a lasting solution arrives? That's the question some are now asking as flooding continues to destroy infrastructure and municipalities dedicate more money to flood mitigation based on what some experts say is historical data that may not provide the needed protection moving forward. As part of our series, Central Florida Seen and Heard Rising Water, Mario Pedersen reports.
Local flood mitigation systems are built based on an area's geography and storm frequency.
The understanding was that you get 30 years of rainfall record, and that's sort of representative of what we assumed was what we call stationary or a non-changing climate.
That's Dr. Eben Bean of the University of Florida. Bean says this basis for creating a flood mitigation system is baked into regulations and state and federal codes. But these days, scientists say severe weather is becoming more frequent, and some attribute it to climate change.
But then as climate started changing, it is something that is not necessarily incorporated into our current approach yet.
Cue Cynthia Slater.
Good evening. I'm Cynthia Slater, president of the NAACP, but first a lifelong resident of the city of Daytona Beach.
It's October 2022, and Slater stands before the Daytona Beach City Council a week after Hurricane Ian flooded her neighborhood. It was her fourth flood in 20 years. In front of the council, she lays out 4 pairs of wading boots.
These are all of the boots that I had to purchase because of all of the flooding. I refuse to continue to invest in a home where as soon as it is repaired, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years down the road, we're flooded again and again and again.
Today, you can hardly tell Slater's home was damaged, but her retirement account shows the scars. After insurance and FEMA paid for damages, Slater dipped into her retirement account to cover a remaining $15,000. Slater thinks in total about $500,000 has been put into the house after all 4 floods. With the money gone, she's left with a thought. If stronger storms are becoming more frequent, what is the city doing for better flood mitigation?
The flood mitigation is the greatest issue of my political life.
That's Daytona Beach Mayor Derrick Henry. He says before Ian, the city made retention ponds larger with improvements to drain infrastructures, but the storm was too powerful. Kelly Kibler is an environmental engineer at the University of Central Florida. She says most of us have probably heard terms like the 100-year flood. That's commonly thought to be a really severe storm that only happens once every 100 years.
But as events become larger and larger, they tend to occur more and more infrequently.
But what a 100-year flood actually means is that there's a 1% chance of a major storm or flooding any given year. Kibler says that while our current models and planning are built on historical data, there are now conversations happening around considering future forecasts that are more dire. This idea of using predictive modeling is still fairly new and hasn't been incorporated into policies. However, Eben Bean from UF says there's no future where forecast modeling isn't a part of flood mitigation systems.
Anything new that's going in nowadays will be experiencing the effects of climate change. And so that in and of itself, I think, would warrant using some type of future projections to at least account for it in some way. Ignoring it at this point is, it's not being based in reality.
As for Cynthia, she remains concerned.
20 years from now, where will we be? How far underwater will we be?
Daytona Beach is undergoing a study by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to determine where more flood mitigation is needed. The study is expected to take 2 to 3 years. Mario Pedersen, Central Florida Public Media.